Man Up, a program dedicated to inspiring and helping men live lives of heroic virtue. And now, it's time to man up.
Welcome to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. We are broadcasting on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. I am Joe Stopulos, and today I'm going to do some reflections on one of the most important people in my life in the last 16 years, Doug Reichardt, who passed away from a battle of cancer last month, and he made an enormous impact on my life. And similar to how I did an episode with my brother Tim after the passing of our piano teacher, reflecting on really mentorship and the ability of one person to make an impact in others' lives. Well, Doug did that par excellence, probably more than any other person I've ever met. And so I wanted to take just an episode today and reflect on what are some of those things that Doug had. That, and again, he had natural gifts that you just God-given gifts that he happened to use. But what are some of those things that we could learn from him and his life? So let's start in prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our defense against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. Do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Another thing is, it is the month of November in the Catholic Church. Obviously, this is the month that we set aside to remember our dead. And so I do think back-to-back episodes now where I've kind of done an homage to people who I've been praying for and thinking about a lot, just because their funerals were literally 4 days apart. But a little background on Doug. I think on this first part here, I kind of give you a little biographical sketch. Doug was born in the 1950s here in Des Moines and was the son of Bill Reichardt. And Bill Reichardt was obviously I'm a transplant to Des Moines, but anyone who grew up in the 1960s, 70s, 80s knows Bill Reichardt. Bill Reichardt was a kind of a larger than life figure. And so Doug had kind of a lot of stories about Bill, and anyone from here kind of knows him. He owned a clothing store and was on TV a lot and had this really huge personality. And so Doug came up underneath him. Doug went to the University of Iowa and played football there, met his wife, I think in high school, and they're high school sweethearts, but then definitely married young, had kids pretty young, had kids at like 21, 22, 23, somewhere in there. But he had 3 kids when he was 25, I think, because I remember I was 24 when I got married, and I remember him saying something, and I just turned 25, and I think he mentioned that he had like 3 kids at that point. So, really had a full life at a young age and was very successful at Holmes Murphy. And he was, one of the best salespeople we ever had, and then quickly became the chairman and CEO in his 30s. So he had 3 young kids, was in his 30s, and became the chairman and CEO. And he took it over. These are rough numbers, but he took it over at like a $20 million company. And by the time he and the other 2 guys who ran the company retired, it was up about an $85 million company. So he took in his 30s this company that was $20 million and times it by 4 essentially during his career. And then actually after Holmes Murphy had another career. But it's not the business stuff that I want to talk about today with Doug Reichardt. What I want to talk about today is the kind of person he was and what we can learn from the kind of person that Doug Reichardt was. And again, anyone who knew him, and this is kind of hard to describe, is because he was such a larger than life figure that every time he walked into a room, he lit it up in a way that you can't describe. And not everyone's going to have that charisma that he has. Very few people have that charisma. But again, I think there is certain traits he has that all of us can learn from. There are certain things that he taught that I think all of us can learn from. And so I'm going to head to a short break. And when we return, I'm going to kind of go through his philosophy and some of the things that he taught me and some of the things that he taught other people, because he was one of these just special people in the world that has a lot to teach all of us. And I think it would be appropriate for us to just spend, 20 minutes reflecting on some of these great lessons that I learned from Doug Reichardt. So stick around. We'll head to a short break, and we'll be right back.
Support for programming provided by Intervisions Healthcare.
Would you like to join our medical team? Intervisions Healthcare, a free and faith-based medical clinic in Des Moines, serves women with unplanned pregnancies. We're looking for a registered nurse to help serve our patients. If you would like to come work for us, we'd love to talk to you. Give us a call today at 515-440-2273. If you're a compassionate professional nurse looking to help vulnerable pregnant women, give us a call, 515-440-2273.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from A New Look Exteriors, an Anderson-certified contractor providing custom window installations, roofing, siding, gutters, concrete, and more to help give your home a new look. Learn more at anewlookexteriors.com.
Confluence Brewing Company, a former homebrewer's dream, is now a hub where great things come together. situated south of Grays Lake and easily accessible via the bike trail in Des Moines. Thank you, Confluence Brewing Company, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
Support for programming has been provided by Marr Security Services, a family-owned security company that provides full-service security solutions to homes and businesses throughout the Midwest. Learn more at permarsecurity.com. Thank you, Marr Security Services, for supporting Iowa Catholic Radio.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. Thought I'd start this this part of the episode with just I did a little LinkedIn post, probably the first time I've ever posted on LinkedIn in the 16 years I've been on it, probably. This might help set the stage for who Doug Reichardt was and who he was to me. I said, in our lives, there are certain people who have an outsized impact on the person that we become. Parents, grandparents, teachers, coaches, mentors, pastors, and others are often these influential figures. For me, one of the greatest of these was Doug Reichardt. When I met Doug, I was a college senior just trying to get a job at Holmes Murphy. My first meeting with Doug was quintessential Doug, and those who know him know what I mean. I'll get more into that in a second. I had no idea when I was hired that I would get one-on-one time weekly with the chairman of our company for a few years just because he enjoyed mentoring so much. Those meetings were invaluable and transformative to the person that I'd become, and I was blessed to have Doug in my life, first as a mentor and then as a friend, and I will miss him greatly. All those words are very true. And so my first meeting with Doug Reichardt was I tried to get into Holmes Murphy. I really wanted the job at Holmes Murphy. And because I saw my dad do this job, I saw that he really enjoyed the benefits world of broker services. And I wanted to be in Des Moines, Iowa. I really wanted the job at Holmes Murphy. I tried and 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 I could not get in. Because they were usually very heavy in the internship program. And so unless you were hired through the internship program, you really couldn't get in Holmes Murphy at the time. And so finally I get a call back and they say, hey, you're going to meet with Doug. And so I meet with this guy named Steve Flood, who's another one of my favorite people in the world. And Steve interviews me and says, hey, yep, I think we're interested in maybe hiring you. You're going to meet this guy for a drink at 4:00. His name is Doug Reichardt. So your next meeting is 4:00 at Star Bar in Des Moines on Ingersoll. So I go to Star Bar, and you meet this guy, and what he's trying to do is really to break you down originally for these people he's mentoring to help you see the world completely differently. And so he goes through this litany of questions of, rule number one, rule number two, what's rule number one? And so, rule number one is you can't get what you want until they get what they want. Rule number two is a question is really a question. And then rule number three is all these things. And he's asking you questions, and then you're answering the question. And he said, why did you answer the question? I told you a question. It's not a question. Sounds very complicated. Anyone who's listening who ever had Doug in their lives knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so he really made me see the world in a different light from that meeting. I was so turned around. I had no idea what I was doing. And at the end of the meeting, he asked me, how would you rate yourself? And I said, well, I'd probably A to F, 1 to 10. What do you want? He goes, whichever. I said, probably a 1, an F, somewhere in there. He goes, yeah, it's pretty close, somewhere in there. So, Doug's, my first impression of him, my first meeting with him was this absolute barrage of information in a way of, I met a guy at that moment who I'm like, I have no idea who this person is. And then actually, as fate would have it, he told me to invite my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, now wife, to the meeting, and she comes. And so then I got to see the human side of Doug. So the first time I saw the mentor side of Doug, and then for the next hour, he and my wife just talked about Italy for an hour. And I saw the warm, gentle human side of Doug. And I loved both sides of it. So anyway, I get hired at Holmes Murphy, and I find out that this Doug, who is the chairman and CEO, and I am a little peon in the company, that I'm going to have a standing 1-hour meeting with him once a week. I think it was Mondays at 6 a.m. or something. I think it was Monday coffee at 6 a.m. or 6:30 or 7, depends on what the week was. But me and 2 or 3 other people my age all had standing Monday meetings with the chairman of the company for 30 minutes individually, one-on-one, 30 minutes to an hour, depending on it. And I would say probably every third hit. So you're going to meet with us. You're going to meet with Doug one-on-one for maybe once or twice a month at least. So that to say, this guy's time is extraordinarily valuable, and he's sitting there spending it trying to teach 22-year-olds about life. And so that's the first thing I have to say is, and there's a really powerful moment in the funeral when his wife Debbie asked anyone who has been mentored by Doug to stand up. And the funeral was at Dowling, and it was packed to the rafters. And like half the room stood up. it was an incredibly powerful visualization of the power one man can have. And that's really, of all the things I'm going to sum up today about Doug, is he had this motor and this passion for mentoring, for helping people. And you look around a room full of really, influential people in the community, and you see like half the people in this room stand up and say, Doug poured into all of these people on a one-to-one basis. Was an incredibly powerful moment for me to witness that. And so he had this way of teaching. Okay. He had this way of teaching, and he actually, so I'll make a plug right now. If you're in sales, if you're in business, he wrote a book with his daughter, Katie, which encapsulated all of his theories and philosophies on sales, on relationships. And it's called The Best Seller. Get Unstuck, Grow Relationships, Gain Access. So Doug Reichardt, The Best Seller. I've read it 2 or 3 times. I've done classes with it. It's a really good book to help you understand human relationships. And what it does is it really brings all of his philosophy into one concise place in story form. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what his teachings were, what a lot of his philosophies were on human relationships. I think that's really impactful for the way I saw the world and I still see the world today. And then I'll talk about kind of the human side of Doug that I think is something we can emulate as well. So in these meetings, what he would try to do is to help you to see the world a little differently, to help you put yourself in other people's shoes. And so while, yes, it was about business, a lot of the stuff he was teaching us is about business. It's also about life. Okay. And I think that's really important. So yes, he's trying to help you generate more revenue or make better sales or whatever. But at the same time, he's trying to help you become a better person. Okay. And so I'm going to talk about a few of the rules from his books. One of the first one that really hits me is to make significant deposits before making withdrawals. In life, and there's another book called The Go-Giver, which is basically, that's all about this one rule, so that's another great recommendation, is The Go-Giver. To make significant deposits in people before making withdrawals. What does that mean? That means anytime that whether it's in a business relationship, in a personal relationship, if you're going to ask for something, you have to be giving something first, right? You need to be able to pour into people before you ask anything of them. So in a sales, you can think of that quickly. In a sales perspective, you got to give the prospect as much as you can possibly give them before even asking for their business, right? There's a little bit of give and go on how you're going to pour into these prospects before you get anything from them. That said, that this works in human relationships as well. And so I think one of the most important pieces of this to me is, regardless if you're ever going to make a withdrawal, and this is what Doug would say, is like, you don't know if you're going to make a withdrawal. It doesn't matter. Make as many deposits into people as you can. And what does a deposit look like? It means calling them, spending time with them, writing a note, asking how they're doing, giving them a helping hand, being a good human being. And so the more deposits you can make into as many people as you can and to build those people around you, the more impact you can then have in the world. Doug understood this inherently, and he also then went out and did it. Another rule was, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. In a business, a rule for business, right? For sure, you might be the smartest guy in the world and have all the answers, but if you don't care, you don't have that human element to you, they're not going to buy from you. They're not going to do business with you. How important personal connections are, how important it is to care about people. And he talked oftentimes about pouring into the receptionist, spending a minute a day talking with the receptionist, talking with anyone at the company, but pouring into everyone there, because people need to know how much you care. And again, you don't do it just so you can get more business or whatever. You do it because it's the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, it will help you to build trust with all those people around you. One of the things that I think Doug did the best, and again, he did this naturally, obviously a little bit, but he then also, I know he worked on it too, is one of his rules is communicate the value of your vision in their terms, so the buyer's terms, whomever's terms. Doug's ability to talk to someone in the terms that make most sense to them was quite a gift. And he preached this a lot about how you have to understand the person you're talking with and then communicate to them in a way that makes most sense to them. So I'll give you an example of this. One of my coffee meetings with Doug was the day after one of the golf majors of 2008, probably one of the ones Tiger won. I don't know, but it was around that time. And Doug knew I like golf. And the next morning we have a coffee meeting and the conversations are very free flowing. And he asked me, "Hey, what did you do yesterday?" I watched a lot of the golf and this, that, and the other thing. And then he teased off of me for wasting a day watching golf when I got a lot of stuff done. Anyway, he then goes into this analogy of Tiger Woods' golf swing and how much time the ball is physically contacted. Basically the point is the Tiger Woods, how long in 72 holes is he actually swinging? And he gives me the number. I said, I don't know, a minute or two. No, it's like 10 seconds. And then how much of the time is actually the ball on contact with the actual club itself? He's like, it's like a split second times 7. It's just not very long. It's seconds. And so Tiger Woods, how much practice did he put into that 5 seconds of contact of the club with the ball? He probably put in 50,000 hours of practice for that 5 seconds of club to ball contact. Okay. So his point on that is you've got to practice. You got to do perfect practice all the time. You got to practice your craft in order that when you're doing it, whatever it's a sales presentation or whatever the thing is, you got to be so good at this. You have to have so much knowledge that it comes so naturally to you, and you've prepared so well for it that you can perform at the time. Okay. The point of that is he knew going into this meeting that I was going to probably watch the golf major the day before. He communicated this in my terms. So he had this whole thing he wanted to teach me, and he did it in exactly the terms that he knew I could understand. He had this really strong gift for doing that. Another one of his big ones was rule number 2 was questions are rarely questions. Understand the why. He would say question's never a question. And so you had to understand there's always a question behind the question. If someone's giving you a question, oftentimes behind that is a real question. And so if someone's asking you, hey, what do you think about X, Y, or Z? There's usually a question. I've gotten better at this of trying to figure out what is the why behind the question. He would always have you dig deeper into the why. Why are you asking this question? Again, a communication strategy that he was really good at. Okay. And lastly, I'll tell you a story about favorable access, and then I'll tell you about Doug. So favorable access is probably one of the frameworks of the way his book and his sales philosophy goes is about general access and favorable access. And another story he told me about favorable access to help drive this point home to me. General access is somebody. Favorable access is they know you or they have a contact to you or something like that. And trying to move people into this world of favorable access. So story I'm told is this is months after I've been hired. So I've been at Holmes Murphy. I've been working hard. I've been doing all this stuff. I've been meeting with Doug and everything's great. And he's trying to teach me about favorable access. And all of a sudden he goes, well, let me teach you about favorable access. He says, do you know the name Mark Bodden? I said, yeah, I know Mark Bodden. How do you know Mark Bodden? So Mark Bodden is one of my dad's best friends in the whole world. And I've known Mark for forever. You go, I know him. How do you know him? He goes, well, I know Mark Bodden because I was in a YPO group with him for many, many years. He goes, and I know Mark Bodden and I trust Mark Bodden. He goes, Joe, how long did you try getting into Holmes Murphy before you got a call back? I said, I don't know, 6 months. I knocked and I called and I emailed and I called and I called. He goes, how did it go for you? I go, very poorly. I got nothing. He goes, did you get a call kind of out of the blue? I go, yeah. He goes, did you think you did something to get that? I go, I don't know. I guess I didn't think about it. He goes, Mark Bodden called me. Your dad and Mark Bodden were talking, and your dad mentioned Holmes Murphy. Mark Bodden goes, well, I know the CEO there. I'll give him a call. So Mark calls me and gives me a good word for you, and that's why you got a job interview. So Doug had saved this story for probably 3 or 4 months before he finally drops on me that, and Mark Bodden never told me this, my dad never told me this, but that one call of favorable access gave me the opportunity to have an interview. Really cool story how Doug just waited till, a few months in to drop it on me. But it was all about favorable access, about understanding that when you're trying to communicate with somebody, the best way to do that is through having these favorable access points. Well, it all ties together on making deposits within people. So going out and pouring into people as much as you can. Those are deposits. Those are deposits, into people. That also then gives you favorable access. So that way you can do more good for the world. Okay. So that's a little bit of the philosophy. He really goes deep into it in the book, The Bestseller. Again, I would recommend that you do it, especially if you're in business of any sort. But now I want to talk about Doug Reichardt, the person. So mentorship was a huge piece of his life. And it's kind of funny. It was joked about over and over again about how much he poured into people and how you go to these coffee meetings and it would be back to back to back to back to back to back to back. And the guy would just be, have a drip of espresso going throughout the morning. But you would literally have sometimes a 15-minute meeting or 30-minute meeting. And by the time once 10:30 hit, boom, you're out. The next person's they're waiting and they pop in and that goes on. So he devoted so much of his life. Again, at this point, he's got more money than God, does not need any more money, he's doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He could be riding bikes and playing golf and doing all this other stuff, but he wanted to live a life of helping others, and that's how he did it. And he did it in a way that was, again, he also had a unique ability. I understand that not all of us can communicate our visions that well, but what we did do is he took the time. He took a tremendous amount of time out of his life to pour into people in a really deep and meaningful way. And it was very powerful for me to watch and witness this man from, again, we'll say it's 6 o'clock, and then at 6:30 you're out and somebody else is in. And then at 6:30 they go till 7, then they're out and somebody else is in. And this is the way he would do it every day. And he would just pour into people and get to know them in a really deep way, and then try to help them however he could. It does go to the impact that one person can make in the world. And I said this similar to my piano teacher, who poured really deeply into a lot of us. What are those things that we can do to give back? Obviously, you're going to have those impacts on your children. So start there, have as deep an impact on your children as you can. But who are those people in our lives that we can go out and have deep, meaningful relationships with and help out? That was something that Doug did in, again, par excellence, better than anyone I've ever seen. But all of us can do this. And so we all don't have the gifts that Doug had when it came to communication, interpersonal skills. But we can all make the effort to impact those around us. And we're going to do it in different ways, for sure. But that's the power of what Doug showed me, is that one person can have impacts. Again, that visualization of all of us. And I was sitting at the funeral next to Governor Reynolds. She stood up too. When asked who has been mentored by Doug Reichardt, the governor of Iowa stood up as well. The impact one person can have on a room of people, and then the reverberations of that. There was a guy who stood up afterwards at the memorial at Moncada, who was in prison for 25 years, a violent criminal, who said Doug Reichardt saved his life. After he got out of prison, he was introduced to Doug Reichardt. And this guy gave this most eloquent 5-minute, maybe 6 minutes, I don't know, 7, 8 minutes. It was unbelievable. And he just talked about how without Doug Reichardt in his life, he would have been back in prison. And Doug Reichardt saved his life. Again, this is a guy that Doug didn't know, but he just poured into him. And there are many examples of that. His marriage was something I always loved. So he had this, we're in the middle of the marriage series. Maybe this is a little bit of a tie into that, but his wife and he had this, they loved each other so deeply, and you could tell. And one of my favorite lines about it, and I'll probably steal this, is every time I asked him, "Hey, Doug, how's Debbie?" I said, "Oh man, she's crazy about me." I love that line, and I just their marriage was something every time they were together, they were so happy, and it was something I love to see. I love, as we're in the middle of a series on the joy of marriage, Doug lived it out. One of the things I asked for some feedback, and for another former president of our company, Den Bishop, I asked him his thoughts on Doug. He says, well, one of the things about Doug is his counsel. So Doug would help even, after he was gone. He still helped the Holmes Murphy however he could. And he says his counsel was unique. He would not try to solve the problems and then give you the answer. He would ask you questions and allow you to reach your own conclusions so that you would, on your own, respond to life's challenges. And I think that's beautiful. He didn't want to give you the answers that he thought maybe that he had, but he wanted to help you get there and then have you respond to life's challenges, but give you the direction and maybe give you the questions to help you get there. And I think that's just a powerful tool that Doug had as a way of mentoring, not just saying, here's what you do, but making you work for it and having you earn it, and then having it be formed in your own head and having you own whatever these decisions were in your life. Another friend of mine, Jay Fryermuth, who I had in the show recently, I talked to him about it, and he says, the definition of a leader is someone that people want to follow. And people would naturally want to follow. And that was Doug. He would walk into a room and he could connect well with everyone. Back to the book, though. I mean, he could connect because he cared, because he made deposits in everyone in the room. That allowed him to be the leader that people wanted to follow, right? And Doug would talk about leadership a lot, about how that's the model of leadership is building trust. And how do you build trust? You build trust on a one-to-one basis by truly caring about people. And again, I think all this plays into, obviously, as a Catholic men's show, this plays into the Christian theme of just treating people how they ought to be treated, and pouring into people in a deeper level and truly caring about them. And that's what Doug did better than almost anyone I've met in my life. We're going to head to a short break. and we'll be right back.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from John Leonetti, EOS Implementer, the entrepreneurial operating system, helping businesses and organizations clarify, simplify, and achieve their vision. John.Leonetti at EOSWorldwide.com.
Thank you to our business partner, Big Red Q Quick Print. Family owned and operated since 1980, Big Red Q Quick Print is a full-service print shop ready to help you with all your printing needs with speed and accuracy. BigRedQ-Des Moines.com. BigRedQ-Des Moines.com.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. Some final thoughts on Doug Reichardt. In the wonderful life and legacy he had, at the funeral, his daughter and Monsignor Hess both highlighted his faith journey, and the man of faith he was, quiet faith but a strong faith, and a beautiful testament to the kind of guy he was, internally as well. The private side of him that we didn't get to see as much, but again, a great man through and through. And I think that as I reflect on Doug Reichardt, and I reflect on the kind of person he was and what we can learn from him, it is just all about caring for people and treating them as they ought to be treated. I mean, really, he lived the golden rule to a T, and it's something we can all learn from him, is that each of us has the ability to make other people's lives better. You just have to do it. You have to go and get out of your comfort zone sometimes and pour into other people. And again, I don't think any of us can do it to the level he did it. I mean, honestly, he just had a motor on him, but all of us can do it in some way in our lives. All of us can find people to reach out to and find people to mentor and find people to care for. So with that, thank you for joining me today on Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. I am Joe Stopulos. It's time to man up.
Man Up, inspiring men to live out their call to holiness.